Adam Neely says that AI will not pass the musical Turing test, and we're going to debunk that right now. What Adam does do in this very roundabout video is he just gets really semantic with definitions, and he reworks the definition with the illusion of making a new point that he is now afforded due to this expanded, less intuitive definition. And it starts to feel like he just wants to be coming across as this sage, comforting visionary who is looking through all the signal and the noise, thinking ahead many decades and years, and trying to make sense of it all for us, the viewing audience. But there are some issues with his thought process that can be revealed to be non-substantive, and we're going to dive into that right now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the appeal that he makes at the beginning.
I'm not going to bullshit you in this video. I'm not going to appeal to some vague sense of the uniqueness of human musical creativity. AI has no soul.
So right off the bat, he's saying, don't worry. This video isn't just going to be me regurgitating the age-old defiant take that, oh, AI will never match the irreplaceable value of the human soul, right? Okay, but then cut to later in the video, and he basically contradicts himself. He basically says exactly that using different terminologies. And you're going to hear him start evangelizing about the irreplaceable, value of humans. So listen to this.
And so you get things like the beautiful, rich history of the blues, a Black American tradition, reduced to typing into a text prompt. That's why I refuse to call this stuff music, because the technology behind it is so aggressively anti-human, anti-history, anti-music.
So here he is now on this very abstract pedestal, and what he's saying is essentially just appealing to your emotions. Oh, what these robots and AI composing softwares can do is anti-human. Now, what a completely vague and generic thing to say, anti-human, and to just drop that emotional bombshell as if it speaks for itself. What do you mean that this is anti-human? What is this doing that is hurting humans? Right? He's basically guilty of saying what he wouldn't do at the beginning, which is to just fall back on the idea of, oh, this is anti-human. And, in as many words, he says, you could never replace history? What? So Adam's big take with this is that he's going to do his twisted definition to have this carve-out where now he gets to make an epic point that others haven't made. So he says, oh, well, technically, if you think about it, brothers and sisters, what AI writes is not music, okay? So Adam, in this video, tries to redefine, recontextualize music as not just the recording that you listen to or the composition per se, but the activity. It's the action of, moving your fingers on the fretboard and factoring in the wealth of music history that got us to this point. And I've heard people make that case about, board games, too. It's like, if you buy the board game Monopoly, well, the game box with all the pieces inside it is not the game. It only, becomes the game when you sit down and play it and you engage with the mechanics and there's context. And it's like, well, congratulations, Mr. Armchair Philosopher. You just tried to make a new point by stretching an existing definition that's really quite straightforward to begin with. So you've said nothing using a great many words. So we're going to see a quote that gets to the heart of this.
The presumed autonomous thingness of works of music is, of course, only part of the prevailing modern philosophy of art in general. What is valued is not the action of art, not the act of creating, and even less that of perceiving and responding, but the created art object itself.
So he's saying that the more modern mentality only defines music by, the audio recording itself, but it eliminates, the action of art, the act of creating, and then also the perceiving and responding, right? Opening up the definition of music to be not just the audio itself, but the components of the person listening to it. How do they react to it? How do they discuss it with others, right? What sort of thoughts and experiences does it create in the listeners? And what does the audience discover in the course of their response and discussing it? And so this whole thingness of art, quote, is just a cop-out. It's twisting the definition for a convenient carve-out. We all know that when it comes to music tests and Turing tests, we're just talking about the music itself. So to have this twisted definition as a way of making a bold claim in a thumbnail in order to drive clicks, it is allowed. It's not breaking the terms of service, but it is non-substantive and self-congratulatory. So there's nothing to stop me from noticing it and calling it to the attention of my audience. But even if we were talking about all these other things, the action of art, the components of perceiving the art and responding to it, a robot will be able to do all those things eventually. If you need to think of it as a Westworld type of situation, that's to say nothing of whether it will feasibly happen in our lifetimes. But by the end of this video, we will touch on the ultimate limits and ceiling of AI. Can it feasibly do all these extra things that surround the actual audio recording, but become a societal process, a conversation and communication medium?
AI sports intelligence is meaningless. You gotta have robots on the field processing in real time what's going on with their robot bodies. Without a body, AI music intelligence is meaningless.
Meaningless? Are you serious with this, dude? We're only really talking about the composition element.
You gotta have robots on the bandstand processing in real time what's going on with their robot bodies. As the great jazz educator Hal Galper said, we musicians are athletes of the fine muscles. And like athletes of the larger muscles, our meaning is created by our bodies doing things.
Well, that may be true, but there's literally nothing to stop a robot from getting to that point. This is a massively concerning failure of imagination on Adam Neely's part in this case. Or maybe he knows full well that what he's saying is a stretch, but he wants to sell that, comforting message, right? Exactly what he said he wouldn't do at the start. I'm not going to appeal to the irreplaceable uniqueness of the human soul and spirit, right? But then you look at each section, and he's just doing that, implying that, nothing could replace the physicality of applying your fingers to the fretboard. That's totally bizarre. A robot would get as good and even 5 times better than a human given enough time. One of the reasons why he seems to be okay with presenting this is because he also cites the aspect of prohibitively expensive energy costs. He gives the example of some of the more commonplace AI image generation or even music generation stuff. As of the year 2025, even some of those more basic AI functionalities do seem to have a massively high energy requirement. You go to the site at Facebook or whatever, and you see all these massive servers, that it takes so much energy even to do basic stuff that it would take far too much energy to be able to do all of these things. Thinking and performing physically like a human, factoring in the whole of human history into the context of the expression. It's perfectly fine to say that those absurd energy costs would prevent it from realistically happening in the near future, but you are honing in and tunnel visioning on our very particular chapter of human history and losing sight of how this process of energy creation will get exponentially more efficient with each passing generation. Another thing that happens in this video is that Adam recognizes the potential crisis on the horizon as far as how good this technology could get, and then what ripple effects will that have on working musicians.
We share in vivo the struggle, the joy, and the experience of our lived selves moving through the world.
Experience of our lived selves moving through the world. Oh, okay, so you mean the irreplaceable magic of the human soul? This is so misguided. What he just said is exactly what he promised not to do at the beginning of the video, which is just to wax philosophical about all the beauty and nuance and imperfections of being a human playing music. So you've undercut your own point. And then showing us, the close-ups of, all the fingers moving on the fretboard. And if you think that a machine will never be able to do this, then you have an inflated perception of your own value and capacity. Do you want to know why a machine will definitely be able to do that someday? Well, when you think about everything that humans are able to do, right? We look at someone shredding on a guitar and it's mesmerizing and amazing and it has all this intangible magic, but where did things start in order to get to this? Well, they started in a pond somewhere. There was a pond, and then a piece of lightning shot out of a cloud, and it got really hot in that pond that provided the perfect conditions necessary to create the first ever single-celled organism, first edition. And we all know the path of that one cell. It started multiplying, it started evolving, it crawled out of the pond, and still, all around it had was just dirt and rocks and water here and there, and it was able to go from that to this. So, guys, if we can go from dirt, rocks, and thunder to this, then why do you have such a profound failure of imagination to imagine what a super intelligent computer could do? Because even most of the AI suspicious people have gradually come to accept some layer of the reality that these AI programs that are being developed across the years are not just limited to do exactly what they're told. They are able not just to follow direct orders, but to be given a set of criteria that they then have to accomplish the goal, but they have to come up with their own quote-unquote methods of doing that, or adapting on the fly, adapting to a tweak in the directive, but they're not just being input, 5 plus 5, tell me what that equals. All right, so now we're going to listen to, this guy is going to whine as if the world owes him something, and you're going to find him stuck in a corner that he cannot escape by his own choice. So let's see.
I'm old-fashioned and very idealistic about that. My feeling is I'll outplay anybody using the machine, or I'll die. I don't care. The day that the machine outplays me, they can plant me in the yard with the corn. And I mean it. I'm very serious. I will not permit myself to be outplayed by someone using the machine.
So that's extraordinarily arrogant. That person whose quote you just heard has such an inflated perception of his own importance that he would commit suicide if a robot so much as meets him at his level in terms of jamming, making music, or whatever. So, I think that a lot of the existential crisis that some folks are working through with this is that they cannot stand the idea that machines could do these things better than them. And that just reveals that they have a very warped perception of what a person is. If an AI can be given goals and then come up with their own not mapped out solutions to solving them, I defy you to tell me why a human brain is different. And I bet that some of you would say, oh no, but with emotions and human history, it's all so complex, and you're dreaming. You're dreaming to think that a human brain cannot be replicated. A human brain sorts through priorities and then calculates the best, most efficient way to accomplish the goals in the same way that a computer will be able to. And whether or not it will be chemically identical within our lifetimes is less important compared to the Turing Test. Whether the mechanics underneath and the wiring of the brain versus the circuits, whether or not that's super identical, the much more pressing question in the short term is, can it pass for a genuinely human art creation? And the answer is, it already is. Now, here, I'm recording this live in the studio, and on the other side of the plexiglass, I do have a great group of audience members who are able to hear me, and I'm able to see their chats. JJ, on the other side of the plexiglass, says, has this dude that we heard from just now not heard of a chess master? So JJ is taking that very whiny case study and applying it to chess. Are the chess pros of the world now all going to commit suicide because a machine AI can consistently beat them at chess? I think the reason why those chess players would not be apt to just have an emotional breakdown and commit suicide is because they're able to look at chess as a very tangible, mathematical, quantifiable set of objectives, goals, execution. And to think that music is somehow exempt or should be exempt from that same conquerability is narcissistic. You are far too locked in to a particular era of human history. And I would say to that whiny, suicidal bassist that we just heard from, it's one thing if you're going to commit suicide, but are you just going to leave your legacy and your descendants to have to fend for themselves? Shouldn't you step up and acknowledge the reality of the world you live in? Instead, you're just going to give up because you're saying, oh no, it's my way or the highway, right? But what about your grandkids? And what about your descendants hundreds of years from now? You're just going to give up because you're too depressed about it? Shake off your depression, put your big boy pants on, and come to terms with what reality actually is, if nothing else, for the benefit of your descendants. I know this is a sweeping thing I'm about to say, but I defy anyone to name a human activity that can't be surpassed by an AI. And I think that anything you think of, not only can it be done by an AI, but it could be done 5 times better than an AI. Alright, so the thing is with all this, Adam has his little moment in the spotlight to twist and massage the definition of what music is in order to enable himself to make a new point that's never been made, so that people will watch this Adam Neely video and go, wow, that was really insightful. I feel like Adam Neely is like one of the only voices in the community where I could even get an insight like this. And it's so comforting to know that so much about what music is could never hope to be passed by a machine. But the thing is, Adam knows full well what he's saying, and he does explicitly acknowledge that he does think that if you're talking about a musical Turing test of listen to this Red Lobster commercial jingle and see if you can figure out if it was made by a human or AI, yes, Adam fully acknowledges, maybe with a little bit of reluctance, he shouldn't even be reluctant, but he does reluctantly acknowledge that it could get there. One thing that I don't see discussed enough in discussions of the coming paradigm shift, we're honing in on musical AI, is to say, well, let's assume for a moment that music will even soon pass the Turing test. Despite that, there might still be a market for genuine human music. Like, if AI music becomes wicked easy to make and it's very common, well, I could imagine a segment of music fans who say, I'm not interested in AI music. I only want to listen to music that I know is made by a real person. It's based on trust. It's based, right? And that brings up the larger musical point that I think Adam is kind of getting at. It's to say, like, when you buy a Radiohead album, you're not just listening to the CD in a vacuum. But you may know about where Radiohead is from, what decades they were operating in. You're thinking about their influences. You're putting all that context into perspective when you listen to it. But let me put it this way. If AI truly cannot match what a human does in this regard, well then there's no reason to be concerned about the number of jobs or the market for legitimate music. If the human capacity to make music is truly unmatchable, then the AI-generated music would not be a concern that it would replace genuinely human music. JJ says there will always be a demand for human-produced art. And I think that, yes, the philosophical thing that comes to mind with that, though, is that if there's always a demand for human-produced art, let's say down the line, as this industry flourishes for, you take a pledge, no AI. Well, let's say there's this one recording artist who throughout his career, he gives the pledge, I'm never going to use AI. He's one of the biggest successes. And then at the end of his career, a scandal breaks. They find out that most of his music was actually made with AI. And so then it becomes this fascinating, almost placebo effect where you were listening to AI music the whole time and you got on your high horse about, oh, I know that nothing can replace human art, human music, right? And yet it fooled you. If what you're saying about the irreplaceable human spirit of music is true, then you should have been able to tell the difference throughout all the years. But you fully bought it, and you exposed the placebo effect of being told something is genuine without knowing concretely, hands-on, that it actually is. JJ says, it's clear that culturally AI is being widely rejected, but there is a shocking amount of people who can't tell when something is AI, so it's hard to gauge from internet reaction alone. And that's the thing. If you can't tell it's apart, then any preference you have for human-made music, it's like you're almost taking it on faith. So that raises the overall quandary is, does it matter? If you cannot tell them apart, it almost exposes that it doesn't matter, possibly. And yet it does. It just feels in your heart you want to know. It's because I think it's as simple as that when you listen to music, it's not that you're only listening to the audio in a vacuum. You are also experiencing it as a means of communication. You are hearing the expression of another real person. And it's for that reason, like I said before, that when you read a book, part of why it's so engaging is because you are experiencing it as an expression, as a communication medium of another person. So if you're now then look at that context and art created by a robot, well then there's almost a sort of loneliness to it. It's like you're not hearing the expressions and thoughts. You're not learning more about a true experience that happened in the... You're just, right? It's tricky. It's tricky. So ultimately, Adam Neely had his cake and ate it too. And I think that deep down he knows full well that he sort of delivered a cop-out, everybody join hands together, try and love one another message of hope and validation of the uniquely irreplaceable spirit of the human creativity, which is exactly what he promised not to do at the beginning of and then he just did it in so many different ways. But here's the major thing that Adam fails to consider, which is that just about anything could be done by AI given enough time. And if you don't think that's the case, then you have an inflated view of what a human is or how the human brain works. A human brain is set up like a computer in terms of instead of ones and zeros, it's electrical pulses. And when you combine the very specific combination of electrical pulses, you get, for example, a memory of that time that you rode the Ferris wheel for the first time at age 7. That memory sticks out in your mind. What is that memory on a literal physical basis? Well, it's a bunch of electrical pulses traveling in tandem to somehow create the language, so to speak, of the human memory. There's literally no reason why you think a human couldn't do something like that. Let me ask you, stop in your mind and think. Is there a movie you've seen recently or forever that you don't think an AI could ever come up with it? Like, could an AI someday write a movie on par with the movie Inception? Or Amelia Perez? Or even Liar Liar with Jim Carrey? Could an AI, given enough time in the future, create something of that caliber? Absolutely. Maybe not in our lifetime, but I've had people come up to me, Alex Yard, and ask me, like, how would you feel if someone watched your music theory videos, because I make music theory videos on my main channel about music from video games. I said, what if someone watched your Alex Yard music theory videos and developed an AI that could itself make more videos in your style? How would you feel about that, Alex? And my answer was, well, it wouldn't be a crime. It wouldn't be unethical, because all that person would be doing is exactly what I do. If they figured out how to make an Alex Yard video, what's the format, what sorts of things does it touch upon, what are the visuals, right? I have a protocol in my mind of how to make an Alex Yard video, and I would be arrogant and misguided to say that an AI could never do it. So let me put it this way. If a human person watching my videos can figure out my format and then create their own new videos that don't infringe on mine, but they take the same template and the same formula. Someone turned around and made an Alex Yard-style video about Final Fantasy music. It's not like I would have grounds to tell them to stop or to take down the video. They're not infringing on any of my intellectual property. Now, if they were taking exact words, phrases, examples, stringed together in a unique combination, that's a different thing. But if there's nothing to stop someone from making new installments in my style, then there's really nothing to stop an AI robot from doing that, nor would I have any grounds to object in terms of commerce or ethics. Vector says given enough time, money, and processing power, AI can probably do just about anything. So now we're going to get to the real mind blower. Forget movies, forget YouTube channels. Do you think that AI could simulate an entire universe? Because I'm going to come right out and say, my view on the matter is yes. Now, why do I think that this is possible to simulate a reality like that? Well, when you think about the fact, right, I have a buddy who played the VR game Half-Life Alyx, and he smoked a whole lot of weed right before playing Half-Life Alyx. He puts on the headset. It's so immersive. It's like the 360 vision, or as wide as the radius of your eyes can normally see. And what he told me after that was so fascinating and jarring in a way is that he said again and again and again, kept thinking that it was real. He kept slipping into a state of consciousness where he thought he was actually in that room. And then he had to snap out of it and be like, oh, wait, this isn't real. I kind of forgot for a moment that I was wearing an artificial VR headset, and this happened again and again. So if you can delude a person into accepting a reality like that and thinking that it is genuine, right? Of course an AI could procedurally generate entire environments and universes to inhabit. So all of this is to say that if you can simulate a reality and get a human person to genuinely buy into it temporarily or otherwise, then I'm sorry to break the news to you, Adam, but even all of the complicated things that you expanded the definition of music as far as human history and the physicality of the fretboard, that's what we call small peanuts. So I know you were able to have your moment as the sage prophet comforting your viewers with your irreplaceable insights about where things are heading, but the ruse is over now that I've made this video. Talking some shit and enjoying the sport of it. So now we're going to get to the finale observation of this video, and I'm going to twist Adam's, I don't want to say deceptive, but non-substantive cop-out methods of waxing philosophical in order to try to make a new, insightful point that does not actually exist. So if Adam's whole take on this video was that this whole existential crisis is actually a category error, well, here's the big twist. You ready? Adam Neely's whole approach to music and discussing it and analyzing it is itself a category error. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you go to Adam Neely's YouTube channel, you're going to see the prominent tagline that says, what the channel is about is exploring what music is and what it means to be a musician. So I am now going to give Adam Neely the reality check that what he does on his channel and the sorts of arts and sciences that he is exploring and quantifying, that is in fact not music. I am here today to say that it is a category error to state that Adam Neely specifically is a musician who makes content exploring music. Because you see, what Adam Neely is not a musician, but rather, wait for it, a mixed media Sudoku specialist. Now, I know that sounds kind of bizarre, and it is a little bit of a metaphor that I'm going to have to expand in more depth, and that's going to be a whole separate video discussion, okay? But Adam Neely is not so much a musician as he is what I am terming a mixed media Sudoku specialist. Now, this very specific specialist field does have a lot of overlap with music, but the issue is that everything Adam conceives music to be is actually more than just music, because the way that Adam conceives music relies on so much prerequisite knowledge and training. It's like, in order to genuinely experience a piece of music, you have to know the history behind all the genres that got us to that point. You have to know all these things about scales and harmony in order to put this or that jazz music in context. I gotta serve it to you real, Adam. You're losing sight of what music actually is. Music on a basic level is just the music that you hear and the experience it creates in the listener. And this is a big point that I try to touch upon and drive home in my music theory videos and discussions surrounding them, which is that you cannot rely on your audience to know about a secondary dominant. So if you're playing a secondary dominant that you're trying to make go to 5, but then you swerve somewhere else instead of fulfilling that secondary dominant, Adam Neely would have you think that it's subverting expectations. But no, that may only technically be true for people that have spent their life in music classrooms and they've looked at all the textbooks and all the different eras, and so they say, when you take a 2-chord and make it a major triad, well, that's a secondary dominant, so it would logically go to 5 next, and to not go to 5 is to subvert expectation. No, that's a load of baloney. You are sort of creating a prerequisite requirement where it's not just music. It's like you have to read a prequel comic before you can even listen to the music. And that's what I'm getting about the mixed media thing. It's like you have to do all this historical research and you have to spend thousands of dollars going to a school to be shown the ropes, all of this, to be able to contextualize this. But you're losing sight of the fact that when you compose music for a video game, you're making the music that the audience is going to hear, and the music has to speak for itself. You cannot rely on a college music appreciation class in order for your audience to be able to make sense of what you're communicating in the music. And I think that's a common problem that these career academics and people that have spent so much time in music education settings is that they start to consider all the background and context and the theory and practice as part of the music. But that's almost like the behind-the-scenes mechanics. The only thing that the listener can experience that's universal is just hearing the song, going to a haunted castle level and hearing tense, dissonant intervals without having to take an entire class to make sense of what it's supposed to be or what expectations it's subverting. So I say that Adam Neely is a mixed media Sudoku specialist. The Sudoku aspect comes from the abstract plan. Before you actually get on stage, you're overanalyzing all these scales and modes and how they fit into the wealth of human music history, and like something like microtones. Now, microtones is something that gets Adam's engine going. He loves microtones. And the reason why I'm so dismissive of his overemphasis on things like microtones is that the average listener cannot even really detect microtones. It's like something that you have to look out for because you're told there's going to be a microtone in here. So listen to this Adele song and look out for the microtone at this one spot. It's like you don't have any of that pre-planning. You're not sending the listener a pamphlet to get them ready for the music has to speak for itself. And if you're spending 95% of your effort for these 1% payoffs that most music listeners will never even detect, well, now you're kind of just locked in this narcissistic loop where you're making music for yourself. You're doing the Sudoku math on a piece of paper, and eventually it will correspond to music that you've made, but you're getting so tied up in these infinitesimal details and mistaking that for the communication medium of music. So, Adam Neely, I sentence you to reconcile with the category error of the very content you make and the mission statement of your subject matter. Because the category error that you have tried to apply to the Turing test of music in order to make a new, exciting, comforting, preachy point, you have fallen victim to that same fallacy, where what you have done on your channel is lost sight of what music actually is, and you have imported all of this thorough education and context and human history and subverting expectations in order to justify the endless circular loop of music education. So, Adam, the next time you write a song as a communication medium to be experienced from you, a human, to another human listener, you have to return to square one and ask yourself, in this piece of music that I am writing, what are the universal traits that can be experienced by anyone, regardless of how much money they've paid for music training in a classroom? All right, that's it. Sweet.